From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. Recently, we told you how some medical schools in the United States offer future doctors a way to finish in 3 years instead of 4. Some law schools also offer a way to save a year. People who want to become lawyers traditionally attend 3 years of law school. Like medical students, many law students are deeply in debt by the time they finish their Juris Doctor or JD degree. Those who take out loans borrow an average of around $100,000. Almost all graduates must pass a state bar examination to get a license to practice law. New York University Law School professor Samuel Erstreicher thinks more students should be allowed to take the bar exam after 2 years of classes. This was more common in the past. Supreme Court Justice Benjamin Cardozo and President Franklin Roosevelt both took the bar exam after 2 years. Professor Erstreicher also suggests a more professional instead of a more academic program of study. Learning more about professional skills, he says, would better prepare a lawyer to serve the needs of average Americans. Some law schools offer a choice of a 2- or 3-year program. In 2009, Northwestern University School of Law in Chicago became the country's first top law school to add an accelerated program. Accelerated students at Northwestern have to learn the same material and pay the same price as 3-year students. Some lawyers argue against accelerated programs. They question whether many law firms would want to hire lawyers without that 3rd year of law school. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Pursuit.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Outdoors in the open air seems like a natural place to study natural science. It also makes sense in a place like Southern California, where people like to be outside a lot. Now, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County has redesigned an outdoor space into a living exhibit. The 1.5-hectare area used to include a parking lot. Now it welcomes birds, butterflies, and many other living things. Teacher Eva Eng has visited the museum's outdoor campus with her students. She says they enjoyed the experience. The children were learning about plant science in school. Museum scientists come outside to describe plants and insects in the natural setting of this outdoor laboratory. Greg Pauley studies turtles. He tells students how urban development has changed the habitat of turtles like the western pond turtle. He says these animals are happiest around small bodies of water that grow and shrink with the seasons. Today, with development, there is much more permanent water, like the pond at the Natural History Museum itself. The scientist says the changing habitat is one reason why western pond turtles are disappearing. In addition to science lessons, the open-air exhibit provides contact with nature in a way that city children rarely get. Landscape architect Mia Lair says children can get real-life answers to questions they may have. Outdoor classrooms help students understand how the natural world is interconnected and how living things need habitat to survive. Museum official Karen Wise says the whole museum is opening up to an indoor-outdoor experience. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Wynn.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Professors have lectured for centuries. But how effective is lecturing to students compared to working with them? A new study compared two classes of a beginning physics course at the University of British Columbia in Canada. There were more than 260 students in each section. Both were taught by popular and experienced professors. The study took place for 1 week near the end of the year. One class continued to be taught in the traditional lecture style. The other professor was replaced by two teachers. They had little teaching experience, but received training in interactive teaching methods. The training was led by Carl Wyman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist who leads a science education program. There was almost no lecturing. The teachers put the students in small groups to discuss and answer questions. The instructors always gave feedback after the groups did tasks, and they gave readings and quizzes to finish before class so the students would come prepared to discuss the material. Professor Wyman says there was a great deal of data showing how identical these two large sections of the class were before the study. At the end of the experiment, both classes took the same test. Students in the interactive class scored nearly twice as high as those in the traditional class. Attendance also increased that week. Graduate student Ellen Chellew was one of the teachers. She says the methods they used are designed to encourage students to think like scientists. The study appeared in May in the journal Science. It seems to confirm earlier findings about lecturing to large classes. But some experts have criticized the way the study was done. Both of the researchers who taught the class, Ms. Chellew and Louis Delaurier, were also authors of the study. This could raise questions about whether their involvement might have influenced the results. Professor Wyman is currently on leave from the University of British Columbia and the University of Colorado. He is the Associate Director for Science in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He says research has shown better ways to teach based on evidence about how the brain learns. And he hopes more professors will learn that how someone teaches may be more important than who does the teaching. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can find a link to the physics test that the students took at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. The Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, is a 2-hour test that compares the performance of 15-year-olds. In the latest test, the countries with the best readers were South Korea and Finland. But students in Shanghai, China scored the highest of all in reading, mathematics, and science. The next strongest results were in Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan. In all, around 500,000 students in more than 70 economies took the test in 2009. The test has been given every 3 years since 2000. Shanghai took part for the first time in 2009. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development released the results. Andreas Schleicher is director of the Education Indicators and Analysis Division at the OECD. He says Asian countries value education more than other countries. They have given education a priority. Every child, every teacher, every parent knows that education is the gateway to success. Mr. Schleicher says other education systems can learn from Shanghai. For example, he says education spending in the province has increased, including teacher pay and training. And administrators are putting teachers into challenging classroom situations to make them better at their jobs. In the PISA scoring system, Shanghai scored 600 in math. By comparison, the United States scored 487. Shanghai's reading average was 556. American 15-year-olds scored 500, the same as in Iceland and Poland. In science, Finland was second behind Shanghai. The United States was 23rd. Education Secretary Arne Duncan says the results show an urgent need for Americans to do more to remain competitive in the world economy. He points out that the United States has fallen from 1st to 9th place in college graduation rates because of gains by other countries. Mr. Schleicher says international testing experts have investigated and confirmed the Shanghai scores. He says the PISA results are not representative of all of China. But he also says they dispute the common belief that Chinese education is centered on repetition and memorization. 25% of the Shanghai students showed advanced thinking skills to solve difficult math problems. The OECD average was 3%. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Public schools in the United States have to be neutral about religion, even though they close for holidays like Christmas. The Constitution separates religion from government. Researcher Charles Haynes explains what it says. He says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Those 16 words provide the framework for how we deal with religion in our public schools. Those words are part of the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of expression and other rights. Charles Haynes is a senior scholar at the First Amendment Center, a group that studies free expression issues. In the last generation or so, different groups have encouraged public schools to celebrate diversity and cultural differences. At the same time, courts have ruled against any publicly supported celebrations of one religion over another. Charles Haynes thinks the schools are generally doing a good job. He says, "So public schools now, I think, understand that their role is to expose students to learning about different religions in a fair way, an objective way. Their role is to protect the religious liberty rights of students. If they want to express their faith, they may do so. But school officials under the First Amendment may not take sides in religion." Holly Jones teaches 6-year-olds at a public school in Loudoun County, Virginia. Each December, she has her students make posters about their own celebrations at home and present them to the class. The posters are discussed and then shown on the walls at the school. Ms. Jones says, "Some students will do Hanukkah, some Kwanzaa, some Christmas. Some we've had in the past do the Chinese New Year. Some children come from families with more than one religion." Holly Jones says the children always ask lots of questions about the traditions of other families. She says this gives them an understanding about how different and diverse the students are. And Charles Haynes says that is one of the purposes of public education in America. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report, written by Nancy Steinbach. You can find transcripts and podcasts of our reports, and you can post comments at voaspecialenglish.com. And you can find us on Twitter and YouTube at VOA Learning English. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. More than 600 delegates recently met in Burkina Faso to discuss education in Africa. The aim is to find ways to support economic growth by improving education and job training programs. The delegates included education ministers and representatives of civil society, business, labor, and youth groups. The meeting, held every 3 years, is known as the Triennial. Alan Beal-Kataria is Executive Secretary of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa. His group organized the week-long conference. He says there is a missing link between education and employment in Africa. For example, schools need to improve technical training for students who do not continue to secondary education. Mr. Beal-Kataria says educational programs need to be reshaped to better fit the needs of employers. He says this is already happening in some countries, including Tunisia, where the association is based. For instance, where they have to train engineers, there is a lot of discussion between the schools and the companies in order to know the demands of the company, to take them into account in the curriculum and even in the management of the schools. In Mali, an association of artisans is working to improve the skills of mechanics, woodworkers, and tradesmen. That association has also helped workers and companies to win government contracts. Several West African countries are working together to develop a network of trade and vocational schools. The idea is based in part on a successful example developed by Nigeria. Mr. Biel Kataria says educators are working to connect government-run school systems with other groups that are helping educate students. These include non-governmental organizations, community literacy centers, and faith-based groups. Among these groups are Islamic schools or madrasas that are expanding what they teach. Another subject for the conference was peace education. The idea grew out of the violence in Kenya related to elections in 2007. The idea of peace education has since spread to countries including Rwanda, Somalia, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. New technology offers a way for Africans living elsewhere in the world, the African diaspora, to aid development in their home country. For example, a professor could use video conferencing to teach a class back home. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. A United Nations agency estimates that 516 million of the world's women cannot read and write. The UN Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, says programs are needed to help illiterate women learn, although they are past school age. Women make up 2/3 of all illiterate adults. The majority of these women live in West Africa. Many girls in that area never go to school. But in Liberia, a new education program is giving women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s another chance to learn to read and write. Pauline Rose heads UNESCO's Worldwide Monitoring Report on Education for All. She says being illiterate causes huge problems in daily life. She notes situations like not being able to read directions on a medicine bottle or the number on a bus. Ms. Rose says illiteracy affects not only the women, but also their families, because women are often the main caregivers of children. She says when women are illiterate, they are less likely to use health services. Some countries, like Senegal, have improved women's literacy rates through government efforts. They tell more girls in primary school and community programs about the importance of education. But there are still many nations where less than 1 in 4 women can read and write. They include Niger, Benin, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Ms. Rose says these countries need literacy programs that target women. Liberia, for example, has launched a Second Chance literacy campaign to teach women. Liberia's Ministry of Education says 5,000 women currently study in adult literacy programs across the country. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Malala Yousafzai spoke to hundreds of young people at the United Nations on July 12th. It was her first public speech since last October, when the schoolgirl was shot in the head by Taliban gunmen in Pakistan. The UN speech continued her campaign to educate children. On the day she spoke, two groups announced that 57 million children around the world are not going to school. The two are Save the Children and UNESCO, the UN educational, scientific, and cultural organization. A little more than half of those who are not going to school are girls. In September of 2012, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced a program to get every boy and girl into school by 2015. Malala Yousafzai believes the goal is possible. In her words, one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. Sheza Shahid is the executive director of a new program called the Malala Fund. She says the 16-year-old is a true spokesperson and warrior for girls' rights. The Malala Fund was created to support the voices calling for girls' education. The actress Angelina Jolie has donated $250,000 to the fund. A group called Women in the World donated $150,000. The first children served by the fund are 40 girls in Malala's hometown in the Swat Valley of Pakistan. These girls, aged 5 to 12, had been working. Sheza Shahid says the girls have now stopped working and are going to school. Malala Yousafzai is now going to school in England, but she talks to the girls in the Swat Valley through the computer software program Skype. Girls are also urged to tell their own stories online at malalafund.org. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. Classes in science, technology, engineering, and math are known as STEM classes. Many professors continue to teach STEM classes the traditional way, by lecturing. But standing in front of the class and lecturing may not be the best way to teach today's students. That is what Kevin Egan says. He is with the University of California, Los Angeles. He also is co-author of a new study. It found that lecturing is still used a great deal in STEM courses taught in the United States. Kevin Egan says lecturing is not bad, but it tends to be less productive when it is the only teaching technique used in the classroom. He says that when teachers add class discussion, encourage questions, and provide hands-on activities, students are better engaged in learning. Supporters say placing students at the center of instruction changes the focus from teaching to learning. The study did find a growing use of student-centered methods like class discussions, cooperative learning, and student presentations. Female professors are more likely than male professors to use the new methods in undergraduate classes. More than 60% of female faculty in science, technology, engineering, and math said they used cooperative learning methods. That was compared to about 40% of male teachers. Lecturing is used the most in STEM courses. Kevin Egan says faculty members need time away from their classes to learn some of these new techniques. The result of older methods may be low completion rates in STEM programs. The Chronicle of Higher Education noted that less than 40% of students who seek a degree in one of these subjects actually graduate with one. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is your news about education in special English. Medical schools in the United States traditionally require 4 years of study. Now, a small number of universities are offering 3-year programs. Finishing medical school in 3 years means new doctors could begin their careers sooner. The reduction of a year could also save up to 25% of the cost. That would decrease heavy student loan debts for some students who borrow money to pay for their education. Schools offering 3-year programs include the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center and Mercer University in Georgia. New York University in Manhattan is also testing a 3-year program. At NYU, 10% of the nearly 200 students who entered the School of Medicine last fall were chosen for the new program. Students can change to the 4-year program if the faster one is too difficult or too much pressure. Arthur Kaplan is a bioethicist. He leads the Division of Medical Ethics at NYU. He says the current system of American medical education dates back to the early 20th century. An American doctor named Simon Flexner studied the German model of medical education. The Germans divided it into 2 years of science and 2 years of supervised clinical work with patients. American medical schools copied the model. But Arthur Kaplan says today, medical students should be spending less time in the classroom and more time gaining experience in modern medicine. After medical school, most new doctors spend at least 3 years working in residencies in hospitals. Further training for specialty areas can take much longer. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.